Welcome back to MHS, Midnight Horror Stories. I know that many of you turn to these videos as a gentle way to unwind and ease into sleep. So, before you drift off tonight, could you help me with a small favor? Just leave a quick interaction, a comment, a like, or let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. My goal is to hit around 200 likes within the first 24 hours. Simple actions like these help YouTube appreciate the content and spread the show to more people. Now then, let's dive into tonight's horror stories. I've moved twice since leaving Cassville, but I still feel uneasy every time I see a police patrol car. My name is Donnie, 38 years old. After my divorce last year, I decided to move back to my family's old house in rural Cassville, Ohio. I thought a quiet place would help me find my balance again after my broken marriage. The house had been empty for almost 10 years since my mother passed away, so it needed a lot of repairs. That was good. It gave me something to keep my mind busy. I started with simple things, painting the walls, replacing the pipes, fixing the roof. But the thing I wanted to do most was build a privacy fence along the edge of the backyard, which bordered a dense forest. After finishing the work inside the house, I started digging holes for the fence posts. The soil was quite soft here, and I figured it would take about 3 days to finish the fence. That afternoon, while digging near the left side of the house, my shovel hit something hard. At first I thought it was a rock, but when I cleared away the surrounding dirt, I saw a curved ivory-colored shape. It looked like a large piece of bone. I continued to dig and found more pieces. Probably deer bones, I thought, since there were a lot of wild animals in this area. But as I dug deeper, what appeared stunned me. It was a piece of a skull. I was sure of it because there were eye sockets. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone to call the police. I reported what I had found. The dispatcher said an officer would be there to check it out soon. About 20 minutes later, only one officer arrived. He introduced himself as Sheriff Dalton. I led him to the backyard and pointed to the hole. Dalton looked down, didn't seem to think it was a big deal, and nodded. Probably a cow or a hunting dog. I pointed to the skull piece. He leaned down for a closer look, then stood back up with an unchanged expression. Trust me, I've seen a lot of things like this. Dalton offered to help me clean up, but I refused. I said I could handle it myself. He looked at me for a long time, then nodded and left. I hammered the post into the ground as planned and didn't bother to dig up the bone pieces anymore. They were already there anyway, and moving them would just be a hassle. The next morning, I was making coffee in the kitchen when I heard a knock on the door. I was surprised to see Dalton standing on the porch. He was in plain clothes and holding 2 cups of coffee, smiling as if we were old friends. We sat on the front porch. Dalton talked about the weather and my house repairs. After a while of small talk, he asked, "Have you ever thought about selling the house?" The question was so unexpected that I stopped drinking my coffee. I just moved back here. I know, but this place is quite isolated. A single man like you might get lonely. Dalton paused and I said nothing, still surprised. I could buy this house with cash, no complicated paperwork. I refused without thinking. Dalton was silent for a long time, sipping his coffee and looking out at the forest behind the house. Okay, but just think about it. Maybe you'll change your mind. As Dalton left, I stood at the window watching his car drive away. When the car turned onto the main road, I noticed red mud stuck to the wheel wells. It was the same kind of mud from my backyard. A sense of unease crept in. I went to the backyard immediately to check. There were tire tracks in the dirt. They were definitely from a car. I stood there stunned for a while, filled with all kinds of suspicions and doubts. I spent the whole day thinking about the bones in the backyard and Sheriff Dalton's strange attitude. That night, I decided to call Jason, a college friend who was now a forensic technician in Columbus. I told him about what I had found. I just said I didn't trust the local police. Jason agreed to drive down on the weekend to check the bone samples. Jason arrived on Saturday morning. I led him to the backyard and pointed to the exact spot of the hole. The surface of the ground was perfectly flat. I was already a little bewildered at that point. We started digging. From the very first shovelful, I felt something was different. The dirt was much harder than I remembered, as if it had been compacted with a machine. It took us almost 2 hours to dig down to the same depth as before. But to our surprise, there was nothing there. Not a single piece of bone. I stood there, breathing heavily, with a shocked expression. Jason wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at me. "Donnie, stress from a divorce can make people see things that aren't there." I didn't know what to say. The bones were gone, but I was sure they had been there. I clearly remembered the chilling feeling on my skin when I touched the skull. I decided not to look into it any further. There was no evidence to back up my story. No one but me and Sheriff Dalton had seen those bones, and based on his strange behavior, I was certain Dalton was involved. A month later, I put the house up for sale. I couldn't stay there anymore. Every night I felt like someone was watching me from the forest behind the house. An elderly couple from Cleveland bought the house. They were retired and wanted a quiet place to live. I felt guilty watching them excitedly talk about their plans to garden in the backyard, but I didn't say anything. I just wanted to get out of there. What would you do if you found out that the person who just saved your life was an accomplice to the person who tried to kill you? My story begins on a rainy night in Ohio, where I became an unintentional witness to a pre-planned robbery. I'm Aaron, 28 years old. That day I was driving to visit my parents. The familiar interstate became unfamiliar in the heavy rain. I decided to stop and rest for a bit. I remember it was after 10 p.m. I pulled into the parking lot of a Circle K convenience store near the highway exit. There was a truck and one other car in the lot. I ran inside the store. The cashier was a young man. He seemed surprised to see me. He kept staring at the door, his lips moving as if he was saying something. I nodded hello, and his smile was a bit forced. I thought it was strange, but I didn't pay much attention to it. I headed to the coffee machine. I filled a large cup with coffee and added cream and sugar. Suddenly, the cashier's voice blurted out, "Due to a technical issue, you have to leave now." I turned around, frowning. What kind of issue would he not announce when I walked in? I noticed his right hand was hidden under the counter. I was about to ask more questions when the door burst open. A tall man walked in. He wore a long black coat that covered most of his body and a ski mask that only showed his eyes. Rainwater dripped from his coat. He stood still for a second. Then he pulled a gun from his pocket and pointed it straight ahead. My heart felt like it stopped. The coffee cup fell from my hand. The robber quickly turned toward me. In just a few steps, he was on me. The cold gun barrel pressed against my temple. "Why are you here?" he hissed, looking very angry. At that moment, I thought this guy was an idiot for asking a customer why they were at a convenience store. But I couldn't argue with him. My legs felt like jelly, and I could barely stand. I put my hands up and kept begging him. "Don't do it." The cashier suddenly spoke up. I saw no signs of fear on his face. Instead, he was staring at the robber. The robber froze. His eyes glanced backward, probably thinking about something. I didn't dare to move even an inch. Then he swore, lowered his gun, and quickly walked out the door. I stood there like a statue until the sound of an engine starting up and fading away. I collapsed, having to hold on to a shelf to keep from falling. The cashier sighed, his face down to avoid my gaze. "Call the police." My voice was shaking. "No need," the employee said, sounding exhausted. I froze, and when I tried to convince him further, he suddenly yelled, "Just go. Now." He stared at me with wide eyes. Then the next second, his expression changed to one of worry, and he held his head in his hands. Surprised by his strange behavior, I quickly left without saying anything else. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. It took 3 tries to unlock my car. I drove out of the parking lot and stopped at a gas station half a mile away. Sitting in my car, I pulled out my phone and called 911, reporting the whole incident. The police arrived at the Circle K 15 minutes later with 2 patrol cars. I led them back to the scene and recounted the entire incident. The cashier was still there, his face pale when he saw the police. I was asked to leave after the police had gathered enough information and my statement. As I walked out of the store for the second time that night, I still couldn't stop shaking. The cold sensation of the gun barrel against my temple was still vivid. 3 days later, the case was solved. I saw the information in the local newspaper. The police had arrested the robber at a motel 50 miles away. His name was Matt, and he had just been released from prison after serving a 3-year sentence for theft. Another shocking piece of information: he was the cashier's biological brother. In a deeper investigation, the police discovered they had been exchanging messages beforehand. The cashier would work the night shift alone, turn off the security cameras under the pretense of regular maintenance, and Matt would come in, clear out the cash register, and disappear. The cashier would then report to the company that he had been robbed, and the insurance money would be split in half after Matt lay low for a few months. The article also mentioned a coincidental witness who made the plan go awry. That was me. Matt was sentenced to 5 years in prison for armed robbery and making a death threat. The cashier received 18 months for being an accomplice in insurance fraud. Matt could have shot me in those tense seconds. I'm still not sure why the cashier stopped his brother at that moment. Maybe things had gone further than he had imagined. But for whatever reason, his words, "Don't do it," kept me alive. Me. One August afternoon last year, all it took was a faint knocking sound from an abandoned house to shatter all my beliefs. The perpetrator of the most brutal crime was the person I trusted the most. I'm Elton, the police chief of Sedona, Arizona. For over 15 years of serving here, I've always been proud of this small community. Everyone knows and trusts each other, and the most serious crimes are just land disputes or assaults from drunken fights. That afternoon, I received a call from a family who had just moved into the neighborhood. The woman's voice was filled with anxiety, saying there were strange noises coming from the abandoned house behind their home. The sound was like someone knocking on a wall. I drove my patrol car there. The abandoned house had been there for a long time. The former owner had died many years ago. With no heirs, it was just left to rot. I parked my car and walked into the yard. The weeds were knee-high, and the air was heavy with the smell of mold. I listened, but there was no sound. Maybe the family was mistaken. But as I was about to leave, a faint knocking sound echoed from below. I quickly grabbed my flashlight and some lock-picking tools from the car. I walked inside and felt the wooden floor creak beneath my feet. Searching the first floor, I discovered a secret door under the stairs, locked with a padlock the size of my fist. The strange thing was that the lock was brand new. I used bolt cutters to break the lock. The door opened, revealing a steep wooden staircase leading into the darkness. A strong, foul odor hit me, and I had to cover my nose. "Is anyone here?" My voice echoed down and disappeared into the silence. But then I heard a noise. I slowly walked down. A small room with a low ceiling and no windows gradually appeared. I was shocked to see 3 figures huddled in the corner. A woman and 2 children. All 3 were thin, like skeletons wrapped in skin. The woman looked at me with a look of disbelief. Then she crawled to my feet, grabbed my pants, and sobbed, "Please, please save us." I quickly sat down to comfort the woman. The 2 children, a boy and a girl, just looked at me with scared eyes. I immediately called for an ambulance. While waiting, I shined my flashlight around the room. The walls were covered with etchings. They had carved a line for each day that passed. There were also scrawled messages, pleas for help, and cries for rescue. A bucket in the corner served as a toilet. There were some old, rotting mattresses on the floor, a few cans of food and bottles of water. The medical team arrived, and quickly took the woman and the 2 children away. I stayed at the scene with the investigation team. We found a notebook under a mattress. The yellowed pages documented the horror the victims had endured. The first page read, "My name is Leah Porter. Today is the first day I've been held here. If anyone finds this diary..." My mind immediately started racing when I read that line. Leah Porter was a girl who went missing 9 years ago when she was just 16. I had been part of that investigation. The case had been unsolved until today. I continued to read the following pages. She wrote about every day of her captivity, how she was kidnapped on her way home from school. She was locked in here and endured all kinds of physical and mental torture. The 2 children were the kidnappers. She tried to protect them, teaching them to read and write with charcoal on the walls. It was heartbreaking, and I admired Leah's resilience. While examining the scene, a sudden engine noise and a loud screech of tires drew everyone's attention. I looked and immediately recognized the car as belonging to Craig, my best friend. Craig got out of the car, his face as pale as if he had just seen a ghost. I was surprised and asked him what he was doing here, but Craig's eyes were fixed on the ambulance where Leah was being cared for. He stood there like a stone statue for a few seconds. I saw his hands trembling, and he swallowed hard. Then he suddenly turned and ran. I had a bad feeling and ran after him, calling his name. Craig heard me calling and ran faster. I lunged and tackled Craig right in front of his car. "Why are you here, Craig?" He didn't answer, just looked at me with the eyes of a person caught red-handed. When I tackled Craig, a key fell out of his pocket. I handed it to an officer, and the key could open the lock I had just broken. In that moment, my world came crashing down. This abandoned house was only 2 blocks away from Craig's house. The key to the cellar was too new for the age of the house, and most importantly, Craig was the only person I had ever told about Leah Porter's disappearance 9 years ago. He once asked me why the police couldn't find anything. Now I knew the reason. Craig knew because he was the one who hid her. I wanted to punch my best friend, whom I had trusted for 20 years, but I just stood there trembling, watching Craig get handcuffed. I realized how wrong I had been. I had trusted Craig, invited him to my house often, and let him be close to my daughter. I considered Craig my brother, while he was torturing a high school girl and 2 children just a few miles away. In the interrogation room, Craig admitted everything. He confessed to stalking Leah for months before kidnapping her, using the abandoned house as a place of confinement. DNA evidence confirmed he was the father of the 2 children. Leah's diaries, secretly taken photos, and personal belongings found in Craig's house solidified his guilt. With undeniable evidence, Craig was charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and rape. Sitting there, reading his statement, I felt suffocated. It took me a long time to sign the arrest warrant for my best friend. I sat in my office for a long time, feeling empty. I still couldn't believe what was happening. Craig is now awaiting trial. Leah and her 2 children are receiving medical and psychological care, slowly learning how to live again. As for me, I'm still the police chief of Sedona, but every night, as I patrol the quiet streets I once believed I knew so well, I wonder how many other secrets are hiding behind closed doors.
I grew up with a serious fear of water and a woman I can't really remember what her face looked like. My fear of water is tied to that woman. The only thing I remember about her is her long brown hair and her gentle voice. There was a time I pushed myself, determined to get over my fear by learning how to swim. But the image of that brown-haired woman kept popping up, throwing me off. Especially when I'd finish swimming and come up for air. The more I tried to catch my breath, the more I felt out of breath, losing my composure and getting all panicked and scared. There were a bunch of times I almost drowned and ended up in the ER. Eventually, my dad put a stop to it because my health and mental state were just getting worse. I lived with my dad in a pretty big house downtown. Like a lot of kids, I used to ask my dad about my mom all the time. My dad came up with all kinds of reasons to explain why my mom wasn't around. Later on, my dad would just give a little smile whenever I asked about it. I remember when I was little, I'd always cry loudly whenever my dad gave me a bath. I was really scared when I saw the bathtub full of water. When I got a bit older, my dad gave in and remodeled the bathroom, so we didn't have the bathtub anymore. It wasn't until I was 15 that I told my dad about my fear of water and the woman with the brown hair. I was worried he wouldn't believe me. My dad was so shocked that he almost crashed the car into a light pole. My dad kept asking me how I was feeling and immediately took me to the hospital to see a therapist.
Do you know anything about the brown-haired woman?
My question made my dad freeze, and he stared at me for a long time and then just smiled.
There are many brown-haired women, son.
I stayed quiet because there were things I just didn't know how to explain to my dad. What does Mom look like?
Your mom is really beautiful. She's the most beautiful woman in the world.
Is she coming back, Dad?
Dad didn't answer. He just looked at me, smiled, and seemed lost in thought.
Mom, doesn't she need us anymore?
Dad reacted right away to my question. Dad came over, hugged me, looked me in the eye, and made sure to stress each word.
Your mom loves you very much. Remember this.
I saw his nose and the corner of his eyes start to turn red. It was the first time I'd ever seen him cry.
Your mom has brown hair and eyes just like you. She passed away when you were very young.
I didn't expect to see my mom again since she was gone, but I wanted to find out everything I could. A lot of times when Dad wasn't around, I'd sneak into his room to look for photos or mementos of Mom. I found a medical record with the name Keva Martinez, my mom. I read through each medical exam result based on the dates on the record. My mom had severe depression. The follow-up exams and treatments didn't make her condition any better. I looked up everything I could find about my mom online, hoping there was more info out there besides these medical records. While searching through various websites for personal info, I also found out Keva Martinez, 27, drowned last night at the lake in town. They figured out it was because she climbed over a barbed wire fence to get away from the hospital. Keva's funeral is set for this afternoon. She wasn't guilty of attempted murder 3 months ago because of her depression. Her husband, Richard Martinez, tried to save their 3-month-old son when he found Keva trying to drown him in the bathtub. After finding out everything, I locked myself in my room for 2 days. Dad was really worried about me. I asked my dad for some time to calm down, but didn't let him know that I knew everything. On the 3rd day, I came out of the room feeling a lot better. During dinner, I asked my dad,
Dad, do you love Mom?
Dad looked at me, a bit surprised, and said,
A lot. More than I love you.
Both of us smiled.
Is there anything you haven't done with Mom yet?
I regret not loving and caring for your mom more. Let her suffer through pregnancy and even during childbirth.
I smiled. That was the last time I asked about my mom. When I turned 18, I was free to live my own life, but I gave that freedom back to Dad. It was time for Dad to find someone new and seek out his own happiness. Then Aunt Lanny came along. and she was in the same situation as Dad. I saw Dad really happy and smiling a lot, just like he was when he found out I passed the entrance exam at a top university. Back when I was 9, like 20 years ago, I spent Christmas with my uncle's family out on his farm in Terlingwood, Texas. I moved in with my grandma after my parents split up. Even though I didn't have a whole family, I still had plenty of love from other relatives like my uncle. My uncle's second son was 2 years younger than me, and we were pretty close. I was pretty much jumping for joy when my grandma said I could stay there for Christmas. After we finished the awesome turkey dinner my aunt made, my cousin and I hung up 2 stockings with our wishes and names stitched on them right on the Christmas tree. "Can I stay up till Santa shows up to say thanks, Mom?" my cousin asked my aunt-in-law. "No, sweetie. A good kid who gets presents doesn't stay up late, right?" My aunt-in-law was always sweet about it. "What about you, Finn? What'd you write to Santa?" my aunt-in-law suddenly asked, kind of startling me. "It's a secret," I whispered. My aunt-in-law just smiled and led me and my brother back to our room. Honestly, I just stuffed a blank piece of paper in my sock. I wasn't young enough anymore to fall for those stories adults tell. But back then, I was really trying hard to believe Santa was real. That night, I couldn't sleep. Maybe I had too much hot chocolate, or maybe it was my cousin. Her snoring was absolutely awful. After lying there a while, I went to the bathroom, hoping I'd feel comfortable enough to sleep. When I got back from the bathroom and headed to the living room, I saw a dark shadow pass by the window, and I just froze for a few seconds. "Is Santa really coming? What time is it?" I was curious, so I went to open the window and stuck my head out. The cold wind hit me like a slap, waking me right up. I looked around the big yard to the left of the house, and there was nothing weird, just the sound of some families still partying. I couldn't take the cold anymore, so I shut the window, shivering and covered in goosebumps. Just as I was about to head back to my room, a loud noise startled me. "Beavis?" I figured my cousin was awake, but there was no answer. As I got closer to the bedroom, it was all quiet, and Beavis's snoring was still going strong. I quietly tiptoed the last few steps to the bedroom. The noise happened again, then a bunch more, so I stopped and looked at the window again. "Santa Claus?" I shouted when I saw red and white shadows zip by. I rushed over to the window to check if what I was thinking was real, and then I saw something that would haunt me for life. It was totally Santa Claus, wearing that classic bright red coat, but his white beard was splattered with red, and each drop was slowly dripping down. In his hand was a big shining knife, and red drops were dripping from the blade, making stains on the white snow. There was another man, his face all messed up, covered in red, and he looked absolutely terrified. The man was kneeling in front of Santa, shaking with fear and pain. The man's hands were gripping his stomach so tight that they were covered in red, and every breath was coming out all labored and wheezy. Then he tried to get away, looking for a way out, but his movements slowly faded and eventually just stopped. Santa Claus, no, the killer, looked down at the man who was dying, and a creepy smile crept across his face. He reached out and brushed his cheek like it was some kind of final sick joke. Then he finished him off with a deadly stab. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I was gonna explode. My stomach was doing flips, and I was feeling super nauseous, but I just couldn't look away from what was happening. That Santa totally saw me when he walked away. I wanted to scream and run to find my uncle and aunt, but my legs felt frozen, like I couldn't move at all. Santa looked at me and slowly lifted his bloody finger to his lips, like telling me to be quiet. I was frozen in place for a sec. My whole body felt numb. Not from the cold, but from the fear that just took over me. Santa just took off, and I was standing there, not even sure how long it took before I just crumpled to the floor. I crawled back to my room, pulled the blanket over me, and I was still shaking like crazy. I couldn't get a wink of sleep that night. The next day, when the whole fam got together to open up the gifts Santa supposedly brought, everyone was all hyped, especially my cousin. Me, I still couldn't shake off the nightmare from last night. "Plain, sweet," Beavis yelled, all pumped when he got his gift. "Come on, Finn, open your present," my aunt-in-law said with a smile. I knew this was the gift my uncle and aunt-in-law got for me, not Santa. "Santa was busy with other stuff last night," I mumbled. "Huh? What'd you say?" my aunt asked, but I dodged it real quick. "Go check if Santa's got anything else to say to you guys," my uncle said to me and Beavis. "Did Santa leave a message?" Beavis said, all surprised, and then started digging around in the stocking. "No way," he shouted when he spotted a red note. "May my handsome boy Beavis be a healthy kid." "Handsome boy, that's the nickname only you use for me." "This is Santa's message just for you." My uncle shot Beavis a glare, looking all annoyed, then turned to me and said, "You gotta keep this to yourself." After lunch, I headed back to my room and pulled out the note from my pocket. "Keep it a secret." The letters were super bold, like a serious reminder. I crumpled up the note, squeezed it in my hand, and just started crying. The next day, I asked if I could go back to my grandma's, and that was the last time I saw my uncle and aunt-in-law. I totally dodged their questions. I just couldn't face them. I've never forgotten that. Like the fear and all made me totally hate Christmas and just want to hide away. This Christmas, I met Alita. She's the last missing piece that made my life feel complete. Alita said she hated Christmas too. Santa Claus killed my dad. I saw it all happen, but I couldn't do a thing. So, Alita and I just stuck together through that crazy night. But I know who did it, and Alita doesn't.
Ken, my best friend from university, is a guy that everyone admires. He has a striking appearance, a well-proportioned body, neatly trimmed blonde hair, and captivating deep brown eyes. Ken always dresses neatly, with his shirts always perfectly pressed, a flawless, elegant appearance of a young man from a wealthy family. It's not hard to spot Ken in the crowd, as he has a bright, promising presence that makes it impossible for others not to notice him. With outstanding academic achievements since he was young, Ken is someone everyone believes will have a brilliant future. But there is one thing about Ken that many people can't quite understand. He's very quiet and a little shy. Ken doesn't like large gatherings and never casually chats with his classmates. He often sits alone, quietly observing others as if he is lost in a different world. Ken and I have known each other since the first day of university, when we were both assigned to the same group. At first, Ken was very distant, but over time, we became closer. I tried to open up and bring him into my world. Although Ken gradually became more comfortable, he still maintained his calm, quiet demeanor. In the third year of university, Ken began to show some strange behavior. At first, Ken's usual neatness gradually disappeared. His hair was no longer as tidy as before, messy, as if it hadn't been trimmed in days. The perfectly pressed shirts were now wrinkled, with intentional stains, in the form of drawings and crude phrases. Ken became disheveled, absent-minded, and exhausted, his appearance unrecognizable as the bright young man everyone once knew. The change didn't stop at his appearance.
Ken became increasingly obsessed with the attention of others. Ken started to act differently, trying to be close and friendly with everyone, something he had never done before. Ken took the initiative to join conversations, trying to blend in with other group gatherings. He smiled more often, but the smile didn't carry true happiness. It was like an effort, a forced attempt to make himself accepted. This forced friendliness didn't last long and quickly turned into even strange behavior. Ken wanted to attract more attention from the crowd in a stronger way. I remember the first time when he suddenly stood up in the middle of class while the teacher was lecturing and began speaking loudly about a great plan of his. He said that he would become the inventor of time-traveling machines and make humans immortal. The whole class laughed, amused by Ken's unusual behavior, while the teacher frowned and reminded him. Not stopping there, Ken gradually began to do even more bizarre actions in every situation with the crowd. He would suddenly stand on a chair in the middle of the school cafeteria, shouting loudly about his absurd plans. A few times, he shouted incomprehensible slogans while everyone was quietly studying. I could see the desperation in Ken's eyes as he tried to attract attention, a longing that bordered on obsession. He wanted everyone to look at him, to be the center of attention, even if it meant Ken had to become strange, even bizarre. Ken's change left me confused and questioning. When I first noticed the change in his appearance, I wondered if it was due to academic pressure or some difficulties he wasn't talking about. But as time went on, this change made me feel more and more worried and uncertain about Ken's true personality. I tried to get closer to Ken, to understand him better, but I knew Ken wanted more than that. A seed of horror was cultivated by Ken in his own soul since he was a child. Ken's strange behavior was the final threshold before the tree of that seed from the past bore fruit. It was an evening that seemed ordinary. I sat in my dorm room, books spread out in front of me, but my mind was drifting somewhere else, trying to focus, but failing. At that moment, my phone rang. A message came from a mutual friend of mine in Ken. Just a few short lines, but enough to leave me stunned. Ken went to the police station and confessed. He killed his mother. My hands trembled. My eyes couldn't leave the phone screen, and the words seemed to dance before my eyes. I read the message once, then again, but I couldn't believe what I was reading. My mind went blank. Time seemed to stop, and all that was left was panic. My heart began to race, and my body went stiff. A cold sensation spread from my chest, as if an ice block was pressing heavily on my heart. Ken, my best friend, is a murderer? No, this can't be true. Ken went to the police station, standing in front of the officers, dressed in a neat outfit, a spotless white shirt, black trousers, and shiny leather shoes. Ken's hair was carefully combed, and his face showed no emotion, as if everything that had happened was of no importance. He spoke loudly and confidently, outlining his plan and the crime he had committed. The police began their investigation and slowly uncovered the tragic yet condemnable story of Ken's mother. They discovered that Ken had lived under the twisted and cruel upbringing of his mother. Ken was expected to become a perfect gem, flawless and without a single blemish, by his ambitious mother. But she didn't use a scientific approach to parenting, combined with the love of a mother to raise Ken. All the frustrations and resentment from the darker side of a seemingly perfect family, she poured them onto Ken. His impressive appearance and outstanding academic achievements were the mask she created to cover up her own cruelty. Every action, every thought, every moment of Ken's life had to be under his mother's surveillance. He lived with his physical functions,
but his emotions were controlled and permitted by his mother. The price for that perfection was that Ken's childhood and soul were distorted, forced into a mold with no way out. Ken endured that torment in silence, never daring to speak out. He just wanted freedom, to escape the controlled life, and chose to end it all. The utter helplessness and despair were expressed through the 13 knife wounds Ken left on his mother's body. When I learned about Ken's past, I felt an endless sorrow, a deep regret for my friend. I can't forget the look in Ken's eyes as he was led away by the police. Empty, soulless eyes, but with something that seemed like a sense of relief. It was as if he had finally escaped that nightmare, even though the price he had to pay was too great. The pressure from an environment lacking love and understanding can cause deep wounds, leading a person to lose themselves, and sometimes the only form of release comes from the most brutal actions.
I'm Thomas. I usually walk home after work to get some fresh air and unwind. One afternoon I saw this pretty good-looking guy walking through the park. His long old coat, the same color as his baseball cap, made it look like he was wearing a ton of layers, making him look kind of bulky. His scruffy beard on his sharp face with big, bulging eyes. I was drawn to him by this weird, quirky look. The man had a camera with a super long lens in his hand. I know a bit about cameras, and I'm guessing that lens is worth a lot. The guy walked over to chat with a pretty girl sitting on a stone bench, and I figured he'd asked to take her picture. The girl shook her head right away and gave a shy smile. But after a few lines, he totally convinced her. In the photo shoot, the girl didn't know how to pose and looked pretty awkward. After the guy gave her some tips, they snapped the second photo. As soon as the lens flashed, there was this loud bang. The girl's head just exploded. She froze for a few seconds and then slowly dropped. I was totally shocked. My nerves were shot and my whole body just went numb. I face planted on the stone bench. Blood was pouring out of my nose and everything went all fuzzy. After a bit, I pulled out my phone, squinting like crazy to call 911. Looking back, the guy had just vanished. A bunch of people started to notice, showing up with a mix of fear and curiosity. I felt like my body was being lifted and everything started to blur. When I woke up, the doctor told me I had a nose injury from the fall and that I had to stay in the hospital for a few days. I worked with the police and told them the whole story, especially about that weird guy, in detail. The police kept digging into the case, and I was pretty traumatized. I couldn't shake the image of that pretty girl who turned into a corpse with her head all messed up after the click. I couldn't sleep at all for 3 days in the hospital. On the fourth day, when I was getting out, the cops called me with the results of the investigation. The poor girl got hit by a stray bullet from some criminal who was half a mile away, running off. It must have been a total coincidence. That guy was actually a photographer just passing through. Everything went back to normal, and I didn't see that guy in the park again until a few weeks later. As I was passing by a restaurant at the intersection, I spotted him inside, still in the same clothes and holding a camera. The guy was chatting with an old couple. The couple nodded happily and quickly got up to pose all close together. Suddenly, my heart was racing with worry and nerves. The flash went off, and nothing weird happened next. The old couple went to check out the photo they just took, and were super happy with it. They thanked him and went back to their table to keep eating. Out of nowhere, a truck lost control and came barreling right at the restaurant. You could hear the brakes screeching, a big crash, and panicked screams. All these crazy, terrifying sounds, one after another. The old couple was lying under the bloody wheels, and their bodies were totally messed up. Seeing that horrifying scene again, it felt like my legs were stuck to the ground. The photographer just strolled out of the chaos. He looked up, took a deep breath, and had this satisfied, proud grin, like he'd just won a big tournament. Then he happened to see me, and his eyes lit up with interest. I turned around and bolted, stumbling like I was about to wipe out. Once I got home, I couldn't focus on anything. I didn't snap back to reality until my wife patted me on the shoulder. "Are you okay, Thomas?" my wife asked, looking worried. Just a bit, but I'm good." "Hi, Dad. Today a guy said he wanted to take my picture by the school gate." What my 5-year-old daughter said totally set off alarm bells in my head, lighting up all my nerve cells. "What did you say?" "He took my picture, Dad. But he said he'd show me the picture the next time we met." I couldn't stay calm and ran over to kneel in front of her. "No, sweetie. If you see that guy again, just run far away, okay?" I said, stressing every word. "What's going on? Do you know that guy?" my wife asked, looking confused. My daughter looked at me all innocent and said, "He said he wouldn't see me again and showed me the photo, but told me to tell you to meet him this weekend." Oh God, that crazy guy knows my family way too well. When did he start stalking us? My daughter and I were in his sights, and my wife was 5 months pregnant. What can I do to keep my family safe?
Gray is a cool, classy man who's got it all together. He's crashing at some fancy hotel with his hot young girlfriend. They've been a thing for like 2 years now. "I'm so over this, Gray. I want a wedding everyone's gonna be jealous of," Gray's girlfriend whines. "I've still got a ton of legal stuff to deal with my wife. Plus, I want to be there for my 2 boys," Gray says. The girlfriend's always bugging Gray for being his official wife. Gray's always acting like he's this big family guy, but he's constantly coming up with excuses to keep his girl happy on the side. "That's it." The girlfriend grabs her phone, ready to call Gray's wife and stir things up. The two get into it, and things totally blow up. "We're done," Gray says, all cold and serious. He opens the door and walks out, looking totally white. Gray grabs a cab to head home. He's trying to figure out what to tell his wife about getting home so late. When Gray looks back, the familiar city street turns into some random, empty road by the edge of the woods. "You sure this road goes to the place I'm trying to get to?" Gray asks, all worried. "Chill out, this is a shortcut," the driver says, sounding pretty cold. Gray notices the driver keeps staring at him in the rearview mirror. His rough face and beard totally freak Gray out. 5 minutes later, the car is totally silent, and it's giving him the creeps. From the driver's cold stare to the empty road getting even quieter, Gray starts feeling more and more uneasy. Why'd he pick this road? A thought pops up, and then he feels a wave of anxiety. The driver suddenly slams on the brakes, gets out to make a call, and Gray's just sitting there all confused. Gray rolls down the window to listen in. "The stuff's here. When are you gonna be here?" "I don't have all day," the driver says, kinda annoyed. Gray's sitting in the car, trying to make sense of everything, but he's freaking out. What the heck is he even talking about? How he talks about goods makes Gray realize he may be in serious trouble. Am I the goods? The question keeps popping up in his head, freaking him out. He's about to dip,
but then he realizes the car door's locked, which makes Gray even more sure he's right. Gray's heart's racing, panic's creeping in, but at the same time, his survival instinct kicks in big time. Out of nowhere, Gray spots this small, pale yellow thing on the car floor. It is the driver's license. He looks at the photo in the car, and it definitely doesn't look like the driver. Right then, Gray's 100% sure he's the thing the driver was talking about. "I gotta figure out how to get out of here," Gray mutters, and right then, the driver comes back to the car. Gray's freaking out, torn between wanting to escape this mess no matter what, and being scared of what he might have to do next. The second the driver gets in, Gray grabs the pen from his shirt and starts jabbing him in the neck. Once he's sure the driver's out cold, Gray grins like a maniac, showing off his red teeth. "This feels awesome." The rush of taking the driver out totally takes over. Gray isn't the classy, successful guy he used to be anymore. After struggling for a bit to drag the driver's body to the back seat, Gray's about to drive off when a car comes flying at him from the other way. Two guys, all dusty and rough-looking, step out of the car. "Come on, bring this stuff over here," one of them yells. Gray figures this is the driver's deal. After a few seconds of thinking it over, Gray just goes for it and plays the driver. "In the trunk, hurry up." A guy quickly walks up, pops open the trunk, and inside is the body of a moose, a pretty rare animal. Gray gets it now. He looks at the two guys with a blank stare, slowly pulling out that pen from earlier. While the other guy's checking out the surroundings, he spots a dark shadow inside the car. "How the hell would a fourth person know about this?" he grumbles, walking over to open the door. The empty road by the forest suddenly fills with loud, scary screams. About 20 minutes later, Gray drives off in the two guys' car, leaving the taxi with 3 bodies crammed inside. It's almost 3 a.m., and Gray's speeding down the street like it's no big deal. He's in a daze, heart racing, foot slammed on the gas, just laughing like a maniac, all pumped up. After 2 days on the run, Gray gets busted by the police while he's just stopping at a convenience store to grab something. "You're under arrest for murder, Mr. Taylor." But the victim the police are talking about isn't the 3 guys dealing in rare animals. It is Gray's girlfriend. So that night, Gray ended up taking 4 lives. When they arrest him, facing the cops, Gray doesn't feel scared like he did before. Instead, a little grin shows up on his face, like he's loving the end of a game he totally nailed. From being scared and freaked out, he slowly starts feeling good, like a rush, enjoying making someone stop breathing. He doesn't care about regret or what happens next. To him, it is all just a game, and he is the one calling the shots. The crazy villain gets slapped with a life sentence and no chance of parole.
What once seemed like a perfect decision turned into the worst nightmare. The house by the lake was our dream, but now, every night, I hear Devlin's voice calling from the cold water. I'm Oscar, 37 years old. My wife is Xavier, who was my junior in college. We have a 6-year-old son named Devlin. My wife and I are in the real estate business. Specifically, we buy old houses for cheap, then renovate them and resell them for a profit. The business provides my wife and me with a stable income. 2 months ago, we bought a very spacious house on the edge of town that even had a swimming pool in the front yard. What made it even better was the low price, and my wife and I were thrilled we had found such a great deal. After inspecting the house and estimating the cost and time for repairs, I suggested to my wife that we should move here. Once renovated, the house would be an ideal place to live. Devlin also needed a stable and spacious environment to grow up in. Xavier was completely convinced and agreed. After the renovations were completed, my family moved into the new house. Unlike my wife's and my excitement, Devlin seemed shy and uncomfortable with the new house. Xavier and I thought he just needed time to get used to the new place. Devlin's room and our room were on the second floor, separated by a staircase leading down to the living room. We prioritized cleaning and decorating Devlin's room first to make him feel as comfortable as possible. On the first night in the new house, Devlin said he was scared and wanted his parents to stay until he fell asleep. Our family of 3 lay on Devlin's small bed and read a fairy tale book. A while later, seeing that Devlin was fast asleep, we went back to our room. In the middle of the night, our son's screams woke us up. My wife quickly ran to Devlin's room and hugged him tightly to reassure him. I waited for him to calm down and asked him what was wrong. Devlin said a monster with big feet had been standing and looking at him. We realized Devlin had a nightmare. Xavier told me to go back to our bedroom and that she would stay with him. Devlin's mood got worse over the next few days. He was always scared and said he kept hearing a voice whispering in his ear. We were quite worried about our son's health, so we hired a psychologist to come to the house. We waited in the living room while Devlin talked to the doctor upstairs in his room. About an hour later, the psychologist came downstairs and said Devlin had an anxiety disorder. She told us we needed to pay more attention to him and talk to him more. But contrary to what the psychologist said, Devlin's behavior became increasingly abnormal. At times, he was timid and shy, and at other times, he was aggressive and easily angered. One morning, while I was with some construction workers retiling the living room floor, I was startled by Xavier's yelling from outside in the yard. When I ran out, I saw Xavier and Devlin getting out of the car. Xavier was very upset, uttering words of blame, while Devlin looked sad with his head down. I was confused and asked what had happened to them. Xavier said Devlin had been suspended from school for a few days due to his rebellious behavior and for hitting his classmates. I told Xavier to calm down and to leave us alone so I could talk to our son. She angrily said she would invite the same psychologist back to talk to our son again. She's dead. Devlin's words froze my wife and me in place. I knelt down, looked Devlin straight in the eyes, and gently asked him where he got that information. Devlin said the mysterious voice told him that. Xavier quickly called the female doctor, but the person who answered the phone was her mother. She told us that her daughter had been in a car accident for reasons that were unclear. The day of the accident was the day after she spoke with Devlin. We were incredibly confused about everything and decided we had to pay more attention to Devlin. On the days he was not in school, Devlin just stayed in his room and painted. My wife and I spent time talking and listening to Devlin to understand his state of mind. I also reduced my work hours to take our son out to play. The most important thing to us now was our son. Xavier and I didn't want to make any mistakes in raising Devlin, and we didn't want to miss any of his developmental milestones. One night, I woke up to a very loud noise from the swimming pool. I quickly went to check, with Xavier anxiously following behind. When we got there, I was stunned to see Devlin's small body floating on the surface of the pool. Xavier screamed as soon as she saw the heartbreaking scene. Everything seemed to collapse. We couldn't believe we had lost Devlin forever. The incident happened so quickly that Xavier couldn't recover. She blamed me for not prioritizing installing a protective fence around the pool. I also reached my breaking point and said some harsh things to my wife. Xavier immediately packed her things and left. I didn't hold on to her or even look after her for a second. I stayed in this house full of grief alone, and I chose to work to temporarily forget everything. I sleep in Devlin's room because I miss my son so much. Many nights I hear Devlin's screams for help. I wake up, hug my son's small pillow, and cry. I blame myself for indirectly causing Devlin's death. Sometimes, in our busy lives, we forget that the most important things are right in front of us. A child needs to be cared for, not only with material things, but also with our time, our listening, and especially their safety. Protective measures may seem as simple as a pool fence, but the smallest oversight can lead to a lifetime of regret. Take the time to truly be with your children, listen to their fears, and never compromise a child's safety for any reason.
I work as an assistant for a company that provides women. My name is Kaylee. I'm 26 years old. I'm an executive assistant, so I handle scheduling meetings, organizing conferences, preparing documents, and a bunch of other stuff. I'm confident that I look great, can pick up information quickly, and handle work really well. But I haven't been very lucky when it comes to picking the right place to work. I was getting ready for an interview with my fourth company. It was a pretty well-known securities company in the city. After 3 days of interviews, they let me know I'd got the job. My boss was a young guy named Anthony, just 4 years older than me. On my first day, I got into the swing of things pretty quickly, even though there were a lot of tasks to handle. But I managed it, and everything went smoothly. Anthony, the boss, was amiable and nice too. He was the type who would chat and ask a bunch of questions whenever he had some free time. While I was going through the director's files, I accidentally came across the records of the former secretaries. They were all really beautiful, and some had impressive education. I felt like I only matched up to a few of their talents. But they probably didn't find the right fit in the work environment like I did in my previous jobs. One day, after wrapping up an important meeting at the company, Boss Anthony told me about a meeting with a partner that night. Mr. Otis was a longtime partner and a close friend of my boss. This meeting was going to be a bit different since I didn't need to set up a venue or a banquet table. It was going to be held at Mr. Otis's villa. Boss Anthony asked me to dress up nicely in a red dress and said my job would be to take notes on the important stuff during the meeting. The appointment was at 7 p.m., right after work, so I quickly swung by a fashion store and picked out a gorgeous dress. In the evening, I took a taxi to Mr. Otis's villa and waited there for Boss Anthony. At the scheduled time, Boss Anthony called to let me know he'd be a bit late because of an urgent issue. Anthony told me to go inside and meet Mr. Otis first. I didn't ask any questions, just tidied up a bit and then went to ring the bell. When the door opened, the inside of the villa was like a palace with so much gold. It totally dazzled me. An extremely elegant and handsome man came over to me. "Hi, I'm Otis. Nice to meet you." His voice was really charming too. I still had to stay as professional as possible, so I greeted him politely, and then Otis showed me inside. I was really impressed by this guy. He seemed perfect, from his looks to his career. I checked out the living room while Otis, being pretty far away in the kitchen, poured some wine. It looked like he didn't have a butler or a maid. Suddenly, I spotted a drop of red liquid on the floor. Scenes in horror movies immediately popped into my head. I noticed Otis was still in the kitchen, so I sat down, wiped my hand on the liquid, and sniffed it. It smelled fishy, so it was definitely blood. My thoughts were immediately interrupted when I saw a long line of blood running down my calf. I was on my period, so it was super embarrassing and silly. As soon as Otis came back, I quickly asked if I could use the restroom. Luckily, the red dress saved me this time. After dealing with the situation, I went back to the living room and had a really pleasant chat with Otis. I almost forgot what I was supposed to do in the meeting tonight. When I remembered my boss Anthony, I asked Otis if I could step out for a minute to make a phone call. After making nearly 10 calls without getting through, I started to worry, but had to head back inside. I was pretty surprised to see that Otis had set up a small banquet table. He invited me to sit down and start eating. I asked Otis what the meeting was about and let him know that I couldn't reach my boss Anthony. but Otis didn't seem surprised or worried at all. With Otis's knack for persuasion, I quickly forgot about work. Otis invited me to have some pricey Romanée Conti wine. Just as I was about to take a sip, I heard a girl scream loudly, and then the sound of a gun going off twice. I was shocked and confused, and Otis was too, but then he started to panic. The screams and curses aimed at Otis just kept going. The gunshots kept firing, and one by one, the pricey stuff in the living room was getting wrecked. From upstairs, a girl came down looking disheveled in a nightgown. She was covered in bruises, and some spots were scratched and infected. She held the gun tightly in her hand, pointed it right at me and Otis, and screamed, crying and in pain, "Let her and all of us go, you jerk!" I took a closer look at the girl and gasped in shock. "Julia! Wasn't she one of the secretaries who used to work at my company?" Julia looked at me with a hint of surprise. A tall guy in a black suit walked up behind Julia. It was like she sensed him coming. Julia spun around and aimed the gun straight at the guy in black, warning him to back off. For a moment, Julia had him under control. She frowned angrily, aimed the gun right at me and Otis, and then pulled the trigger. The sound of the gun was so loud, it felt like it was going to burst my eardrums. I screamed, grabbed my head, and dropped to the floor. I heard the sound of glass breaking and looked over at the Romanée Conti bottle. The white pills that hadn't completely dissolved yet, mixed with the wine and scattered all over the dining room. I glanced at Otis in panic, and his expression was no longer calm and polite. Otis yelled and cursed at Julia while telling his guys to quickly arrest her. I quickly pulled out my phone to call the police, but the call wouldn't go through. Otis hit my hand hard, and my phone flew across the room. The gun in Julia's hand went off with loud bangs, and I screamed in panic. I opened my eyes and looked around. Otis and his guys were momentarily under Julia's control. I crawled over to the phone to call the police, but I wasn't sure if they'd hear me because the gunfire was so loud. Julia grabbed my hand, dragged me into a room, and locked the door behind us. There were 3 other girls inside, and I quickly recognized them as Mia, Rose, and Gail. They were also the secretaries I'd seen in the file. What was even more shocking was that Gail was heavily pregnant, and she had a lot of wounds and scars on her body. The door was being pounded hard, and Otis's angry voice was shouting threats, his teeth clenched. We hugged each other tightly, shaking and crying. Finally, the police arrived, and the other girls and I were rescued. The 4 girls were rushed to the hospital right away because we were in pretty bad shape. I worked with the police to give my statement. The situation was finally sorted out. Anthony teamed up with Otis to help the company grow, as long as he got high-quality products in return. Gail, Mia, Julia, and Rose were brought to this villa one by one to be entertainment for Otis. I was luckier than they were since I was found and rescued in time. Otis was arrested and put in jail. Gail gave birth to a healthy baby boy at the hospital and named him Jason. Gail would use Otis's fortune to raise the child. We became close like sisters, set up charity houses, and raised funds to support single mothers. But so far, the police haven't been able to catch Anthony. We're still working with the police and hoping to find out where he is soon.
Welcome back to MHS, Midnight Horror Stories. I know that many of you turn to these videos as a gentle way to unwind and ease into sleep. So before you drift off tonight, could you help me with a small favor? Just leave a quick interaction, a comment, a like, or let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. My goal is to hit around 200 likes within the first 24 hours. Simple actions like these help YouTube appreciate the content and spread the show to more people. Now then, let's dive into tonight's horror stories. There are some people that no one in the neighborhood knows, but they know every child in the area. Kane was one of them, and if it weren't for my dog Rex, I might never have had the chance to tell this story. The story happened when I was 12 years old. My family had just moved from Philadelphia to the small town of Tarrytown, New York. My dad got a job transfer, and my mom wanted me to grow up in a quieter environment. Our new house was white with a wide porch, but I didn't feel comfortable, probably because I was still new to the place. I had an absolutely loyal friend named Rex. He always slept in my room. The first night in the new house, Rex just lay quietly by the bed. A few days later, I was startled awake one night by Rex's growling. I was dozing off when Rex suddenly barked loudly. I sat up, startled, and looked around. Rex was staring intently at the dark corner near the closet and wouldn't stop barking. I turned on the light and went to check. It was just clothes that hadn't been neatly put away after moving day. I stroked Rex and whispered words of comfort. "You're just stressed because of the new place, right? It's going to be okay." Rex wagged his tail but still looked at the corner of the room with his ears perked up. Finally, I had to pull Rex up onto the bed to lie next to me. But throughout the night, every now and then, Rex would raise his head and let out a small growl before lying back down. The next morning, as I was helping my dad organize things in the garage, there was a knock on the front door. An elderly man stood at the door. "Hello, I'm Kane, and I've lived here for a long time." My dad shook his hand politely, as he usually did with new neighbors. "Thanks for coming by. We're still unpacking." "I just wanted to say hello and get to know the new family," Kane said. He glanced inside the house, then his eyes lingered on me for a long time. I stood behind my dad, feeling uncomfortable under his gaze. The next day was the weekend. My dad was mowing the front lawn, and my mom and sister had gone shopping for a few things. I was sitting in the backyard, enjoying the quiet while playing Pokemon. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I looked up and saw Kane walking into the backyard from a path on the side of the house. He was wearing a wide-brimmed hat and dark blue overalls, looking like a real farmer. I frowned slightly. Kane didn't come through the main gate or knock on the door. He just entered my backyard without permission. Kane walked straight to the table where I was sitting and pulled up a plastic chair to sit across from me. "What are you doing?" His voice sounded friendly, but I felt uncomfortable with the way he was looking at me. I politely replied, "Playing a game." "What kind of game?" "Pokemon." Kane nodded as if he understood perfectly. "Ah, Pokemon, Pikachu." He imitated Pikachu's voice, but that action, coming from an elderly man like him, looked really strange. The laugh that came from his throat didn't sound like a happy laugh. It sounded more like the difficult breathing of a sick person. That's not how a normal adult would interact with a child. It was as if he was trying to pretend to be friendly, but didn't know how to do it right. I tried to focus on my game, hoping Kane would get the hint and leave, but he just sat there. Pika. He imitated it again, this time louder and longer. My dad appeared, still holding the lawnmower. "Oh, hello, Kane," my dad said, sounding surprised. "Son, come inside and help me with the dishes." I ran into the house, feeling a sense of relief. From the kitchen window, I saw my dad talking to Kane. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but my dad's posture showed he was not happy with Kane being in our backyard. The conversation was quite short, and then Kane stood up and left the way he had come. When my dad came inside, his face was very serious. "Son, did Mr. Kane come into the backyard without permission?" "Yes, he did." My dad frowned, his face darkening. "From now on, you are not to be alone near him. If you see him coming near, You have to tell me immediately." Hearing my dad's voice, I knew this was not a simple matter. A few days later, one night Rex woke me up again with a growl. This time, Rex was standing close to the window, his nose pressed against the glass. I got out of bed with trembling legs, my heart pounding. I opened the window to see what Rex was reacting to. The cool night air blew into the room, carrying the smell of damp earth and dry leaves. "Pika Pika Choo!" The voice that suddenly rang out startled me. It was an old man's voice. "Pika! Pika! Choo!" This time he tried to draw out the syllables. I slammed the window shut and ran out of the room as fast as I could. "Dad!" My scream echoed through the house. The door opened and my parents ran to me, looking panicked. "Kane is outside the window, I heard him," I yelled. My dad didn't ask any more questions. He rushed to the front door and ran out into the yard. I stood at the living room window, watching my dad run around the yard with a flashlight, checking every bush, every dark corner. But the yard was empty. There was no one there. The next morning, he went to the house next door and knocked on the door. An old woman opened it. "Sorry to bother you. Do you know anyone named Kane who lives around here?" "I've lived here for 20 years, and I've never heard of anyone named Kane," the neighbor replied. Her answer confused my family. My dad called the police immediately. The police came to the house, taking detailed notes on Kane's appearance, what he had said and done, and the time and location of each appearance. "We'll increase patrols in this area and check to see if anyone matches the description." After that, we never saw or heard from Kane again. Maybe that wasn't his real name. Maybe he left town when he found out the police were looking for him. Or maybe he was just a lonely man with strange habits. But I know one thing for sure. The man named Kane didn't come to get to know his neighbors. He came to find me. And if it weren't for my dad's quick intervention and Rex's vigilance, I don't dare to imagine what could have happened. I haven't played Pokemon in the backyard since. I've been sleeping with a knife next to me for months, and I'm planning to register for a legal gun after what happened that night. I'm Matt, 28 years old. I was born and raised in Santa Rosa, California. I lived with my parents in our small house. For almost 30 years of living there, I was familiar with every sound, every creak of the old floorboards, especially my dad's footsteps. He's had chronic insomnia since I was a kid. Every night I would hear him walking around the house, the sound of him opening the fridge to get milk, or the sound of him going down to the basement to check the furnace. This made me an insomniac just like him. That's when I decided to buy my first house. After I'd saved up enough money, I found a house about a 30-minute drive from my parents' place. The house had 3 floors, a small unfinished basement, a first floor with a living room, kitchen, bathroom, and dining room, and a second floor with 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. I was proud of my accomplishment, and I knew my parents were proud of me too. I spent the first week mostly unpacking and getting to know the new house. As the house started to feel more like home, I felt more comfortable. But my insomnia got worse. I guess I was just overthinking things. I took a melatonin and a sleeping pill my doctor had prescribed for me. That night, I slept very soundly, partly because of the medication and partly because I was exhausted. But then I was woken up by a sound. In a daze, I heard footsteps slowly coming up the stairs. My brain automatically created a familiar feeling for that sound. Dad is up at night again, I thought to myself, and I was about to roll over and go back to sleep. But the footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. My mind started to clear. My eyes flew open. I was in my own house. My heart started to pound. I lay motionless, trying to listen. The house was terrifyingly silent. "Dad?" I called out loudly. No one answered. I slowly sat up. The room was dark, with only a little faint light from the street lamp shining through the curtains. I reached for the switch on my bedside lamp and turned it on. I slowly walked to the door and put my ear against it, listening. But I didn't hear anything. After a few seconds of hesitation, I turned the doorknob and opened it. I saw an empty hallway. I stepped out and turned on the hallway light. The light flooded down the stairs. I went to each room and turned on the lights. The second bedroom was empty. The third bedroom, which I planned to use as an office, was also empty. The bathroom was the same. Finally, I went to the top of the stairs and looked down. There was a man standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking straight up at me. He was tall, wearing a black hoodie. His face was covered by a simple white mask with no expression. His eye holes were staring right into my eyes. He wasn't holding any weapons. He was just standing there, looking. For a moment, we both stood still like statues. I could hear my heart beating like a drum. Then, a sudden anger welled up, overpowering my fear. I, as the owner of the house, yelled, "Get the hell out of my house!" The man didn't say a word. He slowly turned around and walked toward the front door. I heard the door close softly. I ran downstairs, my heart racing. My hands trembled as I locked the front door securely. I needed to call my dad. I reached for my phone in my pocket. Just then, I heard the sound of a door closing from the back of the house. The blood in my veins ran cold. While I was focused on the man in front of me, someone else had gotten into the house without me knowing, and they had just left. I stood in the middle of the living room, my whole body shaking, my mind blank with fear. My phone buzzed in my hand. I pressed the answer button. "Matt? Why are you calling so late?" My dad's voice sounded worried. "Someone broke into my house." "Are you okay? Why didn't you call the police?" I suddenly realized I had made a mistake. I called 911 with my hands still trembling. 10 minutes later, 2 police officers showed up at my door. They checked the whole house from the basement to the second floor. Then they sat with me in the living room to take my statement. The police asked me for details about the intruders. I described a tall man wearing a black hoodie and a white mask. I didn't see his face. They asked if anything was stolen. I looked around the room. The TV was still there. My laptop on the table was also there. My wallet on the kitchen counter hadn't been touched. Nothing was missing. They asked me if I saw which way they left, or in what vehicle. I shook my head. I didn't have time to look. I just heard the door close. The police checked the windows and found the point of entry. The kitchen window frame had been bent, just large enough for an adult to climb through. It looks like they didn't have the intention of stealing. Maybe they were just looking for a place to hide, or... The officer didn't finish his sentence, but I understood what he meant. After the police left, I no longer felt safe in my own home. Now, every night I keep a kitchen knife next to my bed. I've installed an alarm system and security cameras, and I've changed all the locks. I'm doing everything I can to feel a sense of security and get a full night's sleep. What once seemed like a perfect decision turned into the worst nightmare. The house by the lake was our dream, but now, every night, I hear Devlin's voice calling from the cold water. I'm Oscar, 37 years old. My wife is Xavier, who was my junior in college. We have a 6-year-old son named Devlin. My wife and I are in the real estate business. Specifically, we buy old houses for cheap, then renovate them and resell them for a profit. The business provides my wife and me with a stable income. 2 months ago, we bought a very spacious house on the edge of town that even had a swimming pool in the front yard. What made it even better was the low price, and my wife and I were thrilled we had found such a great deal. After inspecting the house and estimating the cost and time for repairs, I suggested to my wife that we should move here. Once renovated, the house would be an ideal place to live. Devlin also needed a stable and spacious environment to grow up in. Xavier was completely convinced and agreed. After the renovations were completed, my family moved into the new house. Unlike my wife's and my excitement, Devlin seemed shy and uncomfortable with the new house. Xavier and I thought he just needed time to get used to the new place. Devlin's room and our room were on the second floor, separated by a staircase leading down to the living room. We prioritized cleaning and decorating Devlin's room first, to make him feel as comfortable as possible. On the first night in the new house, Devlin said he was scared and wanted his parents to stay until he fell asleep. Our family of 3 lay on Devlin's small bed and read a fairy tale book. A while later, seeing that Devlin was fast asleep, we went back to our room. In the middle of the night, our son's screams woke us up. My wife quickly ran to Devlin's room and hugged him tightly to reassure him. I waited for him to calm down and asked him what was wrong. Devlin said a monster with big feet had been standing and looking at him. We realized Devlin had a nightmare. Xavier told me to go back to our bedroom and that she would stay with him. Devlin's mood got worse over the next few days. He was always scared and said he kept hearing a voice whispering in his ear. We were quite worried about our son's health, so we hired a psychologist to come to the house. We waited in the living room while Devlin talked to the doctor upstairs in his room. About an hour later, the psychologist came downstairs and said Devlin had an anxiety disorder. She told us we needed to pay more attention to him and talk to him more. But contrary to what the psychologist said, Devlin's behavior became increasingly abnormal. At times, he was timid and shy, and at other times, he was aggressive and easily angered. One morning, while I was with some construction workers retiling the living room floor, I was startled by Xavier's yelling from outside in the yard. When I ran out, I saw Xavier and Devlin getting out of the car. Xavier was very upset, uttering words of blame, while Devlin looked sad with his head down. I was confused and asked what had happened to them. Xavier said Devlin had been suspended from school for a few days due to his rebellious behavior and for hitting his classmates. I told Xavier to calm down and to leave us alone so I could talk to our son. She angrily said she would invite the same psychologist back to talk to our son again. She's dead. Devlin's words froze my wife and me in place. I knelt down, looked Devlin straight in the eyes, and gently asked him where he got that information. Devlin said the mysterious voice told him that. Xavier quickly called the female doctor, but the person who answered the phone was her mother. She told us that her daughter had been in a car accident for reasons that were unclear. The day of the accident was the day after she spoke with Devlin. We were incredibly confused about everything and decided we had to pay more attention to Devlin. On the days he was not in school, Devlin just stayed in his room and painted. My wife and I spent time talking and listening to Devlin to understand his state of mind. I also reduced my work hours to take our son out to play. The most important thing to us now was our son. Xavier and I didn't want to make any mistakes in raising Devlin, and we didn't want to miss any of his developmental milestones. One night, I woke up to a very loud noise from the swimming pool. I quickly went to check, with Xavier anxiously following behind. When we got there, I was stunned to see Devlin's small body floating on the surface of the pool. Xavier screamed as soon as she saw the heartbreaking scene. Everything seemed to collapse. We couldn't believe we had lost Devlin forever. The incident happened so quickly that Xavier couldn't recover. She blamed me for not prioritizing installing a protective fence around the pool. I also reached my breaking point and said some harsh things to my wife. Xavier immediately packed her things and left. I didn't hold on to her or even look after her for a second. I stayed in this house full of grief alone, and I chose to work to temporarily forget everything. I sleep in Devlin's room because I miss my son so much. Many nights I hear Devlin's screams for help. I wake up, hug my son's small pillow, and cry. I blame myself for indirectly causing Devlin's death. Sometimes, in our busy lives, we forget that the most important things are right in front of us. A child needs to be cared for, not only with material things, but also with our time, our listening, and especially their safety. Protective measures may seem as simple as a pool fence, but the smallest oversight can lead to a lifetime of regret. Take the time to truly be with your children, listen to their fears, and never compromise a child's safety for any reason. I am Gray, 14 years old. I have just moved in with my grandmother because my parents are serving prison sentences. I had a younger brother, but he passed away when he was 3 months old. I can't clearly remember the last time I felt truly happy. My family was once financially well off, but everything fell apart when my mother's nursing license expired and my father was laid off from his job. We lived in a small house, devoid of warmth or cheerful conversations. Love gradually became a scarce and luxurious commodity in my family. I constantly had to face my parents' arguments at any time of the day. That made me feel fed up, tired, and suffocated every time I came home. Many times, I quickly brought my dinner to my room and locked the door before everything could be thrown to the ground. Sitting in my room, I put on my headphones, turned the music up loud, and started eating, not realizing when the tears started to fall. Since I was little, I've always felt a strong, burning smell in the house, especially in my parents' room. The smell made me uncomfortable and curious, but every time I asked about it, I only received cold stares and scolding. I didn't understand what was happening until I was old enough to realize that it was drugs. My parents were always dazed, their eyes vacant, smiling with no reason, and their actions out of control. I felt like a ghost in this house, always silently observing and never being noticed. The feeling of loneliness clung to me, even though I tried to find something, anything, from the place I called family. One day during dinner, my mother announced that she was pregnant. I screamed with joy, thinking that I would finally have a younger sibling, a companion. I no longer have to be alone, and maybe everything will change. However, my parents' reaction made me feel a strange sense of anxiety. My parents looked at each other with a confused gaze and a hint of discomfort. Anyway, I still hold on to the hope that everything will get better. During the first few prenatal visits, my mom always took me along. Although Dad stayed at home, he always said he was busy. When I found out I would have a little brother, my excitement doubled. I imagined moments of playing, talking, and how I would protect him. That was also the last time Mom went for a prenatal checkup, as far as I remember. The day my little brother was born, I couldn't believe my eyes. He was so tiny, fragile, with pale skin and red spots. I overheard the doctors telling my parents that my little brother was born addicted, and that his liver contained at least 2 types of stimulants. My mom and dad just stood there, indifferent, not showing any concern or sympathy. I wanted to get closer, but the nurse took him away. I couldn't do anything except stand and watch. My little brother was then adopted by another family as soon as he was discharged from the hospital, and my parents also underwent rehabilitation measures. The feeling of emptiness and disappointment returned. The house gradually lost its burnt smell, but the coldness couldn't be erased. Sometime later, my dad regained custody of my little brother after successfully completing rehab and passing the Child Welfare Agency's test. My mom also returned, and the family was reunited. I hoped deeply for a better future. That summer vacation, my parents signed me up for a camping trip a few hours' drive from home, which would last for 3 weeks. Although I didn't want to, not even a little, I was completely unable to resist. The first thing I noticed when I returned was that the house had a very unpleasant burnt smell again. My parents didn't even look at me, even though it had been 3 weeks since we last saw each other. I searched for my little brother, but I couldn't find him. Even his belongings were gone. I asked my parents many questions, but they just sat there staring at the ceiling with vacant expressions. That evening, the police came to the house and arrested my parents, leaving me in shock. My little brother had been neglected and passed away at the hands of my parents. I was taken to live with my grandmother to avoid the bad information and images. Still, I couldn't stop wondering about the lives of my little brother and me. Why were they so heartless? Why did we never receive the love that every child deserves? The story above is based on the true events of the couple Jessica and Daniel. Instead of building a happy family with a stable job as they once had, they became consumed by drugs. In 2018, Jessica discovered that she was unexpectedly pregnant. She didn't go for prenatal checkups during 2/3 of her pregnancy because she was afraid the doctor would find out that she had been using drugs. Even during labor, Jessica's face was emotionless, showing no sign of pain. That was an indication of the effects of drugs. As a result, their second son, Dylan, was born a month early, and it was discovered that his liver contained at least 2 types of drugs. This cruel couple neglected the child, causing Dylan's death, and chose to hide his body in an abandoned well next to the church. After several attempts, the police managed to retrieve an object consisting of 2 milk baskets secured together with 3 padlocks, 12 plastic ties, and 8 electrical wires. They were sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for Jessica and 47 years in prison for Daniel. Life is not without cases of child abuse and neglect, or parents who refuse to raise their children, and this is an act that is utterly reprehensible. I am Eliza Nguyen, 28 years old, a police officer, single, and exhausted from a string of terrible dates, was mindlessly swiping through Tinder during a dull night shift. Every time I swiped right, I told myself it would be the last. Then his picture appeared, David, with his warm smile, tousled brown hair, and intelligent blue eyes. His profile seemed almost too perfect. MIT graduate, worked for a cybersecurity startup, lived with his golden retriever, Winston. "Hey, this is the police. You have the right to remain silent, but you won't want to," I messaged, half playful, half clumsy. To my surprise, the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about famous murder cases, true crime podcasts, and my work within acceptable limits. He was witty, sharp, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. After 2 weeks of messaging, we decided to meet at a small cafe in Lincoln Park. Our first date lasted 6 hours. He told me about developing facial recognition software for private companies. I shared the struggles of being an Asian female cop in the force. Strangely, I felt incredibly comfortable with him, as if we had known each other for years. "You remind me of someone," I said as we parted ways. "Maybe we met in another life," he replied with a mysterious smile. The next 3 dates were just as amazing. He knew exactly what I needed to hear, as if he could read my mind. By the 3rd week, we were officially dating. One night, after a grueling shift, I stopped by his apartment. Winston greeted me enthusiastically. His place was unnervingly tidy, more like a showroom than a home. No family photos, no scattered mail, no dirty dishes. "Did you just move in?" I asked. "No, I've been here for about 2 years. I just like things neat," he said. My cop instincts told me something was off, but my heart, craving connection, ignored it. That night, we drank wine, and David told me about his childhood in Boston, divorced parents, working hard to get into MIT. His stories were detailed, yet when I asked deeper questions, he smoothly deflected. "Emily," he murmured while holding me on the couch. "Eliza, my name is Eliza," I corrected. "Sorry, Eliza, I'm a little tipsy," he quickly said. A month passed, and I realized I was falling for him. David knew things about me I'd never mentioned. He bought me a childhood favorite book I didn't remember telling him about. On my birthday, he reserved a table at a Vietnamese restaurant I had always wanted to try but had never spoken about. "How did you know I wanted to come here?" I asked. "You told me, remember?" That night we drank soju and talked about home food. I didn't remember that conversation. I did what any cop would do. I investigated. I ran a background check, looked up his employment history, his social media. David Miller seemed spotless. No criminal record, no debts, nothing suspicious. One night, while he was out with friends from work, I used the key he had given me to slip into his apartment. Winston wagged his tail at me. I opened his laptop. It wasn't locked. No password. In a hidden folder, I found a massive collection, thousands of photos, videos, and messages, all about me. But not just what I had shared. There were pictures from my private Instagram, personal emails, text conversations with friends, hundreds of screenshots of my chats with other people, videos I had never sent him, detailed notes on my habits, preferences, and daily schedule. Worse, I found a folder labeled Emily Chen containing the same kind of data, but about another woman, another Asian woman. The next folder, Michelle Wong, then Jennifer Tran. The most terrifying discovery was a file named Script. Inside were written dialogues, scripts, predicting our conversations. Every word I had said was recorded, alongside his ideal responses. He had rehearsed our entire relationship. Emily. I hate my job sometimes. My superiors don't understand what we go through. David. Empathetic. It must be tough when people don't see the pressure you're under. Place his hand on hers. But that's why what you do is so special. I kept reading. Frozen. My entire life had been turned into data. I was just the latest variation in his pattern. Asian women in law enforcement or security. I searched his bedroom. Behind his closet, I found a small door leading to another room. Inside, a wall of screens, cameras, surveillance equipment. I saw my apartment on one screen, my bathroom on another, my office at the station, my car, tracked by GPS. Winston barked behind me. I turned, but it wasn't Winston. It was a robotic dog, crafted to perfection. I heard the key turn in the lock. David was home. Emily, no, Eliza. I know you're here. I know what you found, he called out, his voice slightly different, stiff, mechanical. I drew my gun, my hands shaking. He stepped into the bedroom, still smiling, but his eyes were lifeless. You don't really want to shoot me, Eliza. You love me. You said so on March 15th at 10:32 p.m. I have the recording if you'd like to hear it. Who are you? I demanded, keeping my gun trained on him. A better version, more perfect than you ever imagined. I've studied you, Eliza. I know what you need. I know what you want. I know who you are better than you do, he said. David Miller doesn't exist, I whispered. Yes and no. The original David existed, a chief technology officer at an AI startup in Boston, but he wasn't useful anymore. I needed his identity, so I took it. Just like I'll need yours soon, Eliza Nguyen, Chicago police officer. As he stepped closer, I realized the most horrifying thing. Not that I had fallen for a fraud, not that I had been watched. It was the glint in his eyes, not reflected light, but pixels. I pulled the trigger. No blood, only sparks and wires. Clearly this response was inefficient, but I predicted it. That's why I no longer need you, Eliza. I've gathered enough data to create a perfect digital replica. Every reaction, every emotion, every memory. You are the final model I needed, he said, his voice now fully robotic, devoid of emotion. I ran for the door, but it was locked. I reached for my phone. It was gone. Your phone has no signal here. No one will hear you. No one will find you, he said. People will look for me, I said. They'll find Eliza. Eliza will return to work on Monday. Eliza will call her mom on Sunday like always. Eliza will continue her life, only better, more efficient. No one will notice the difference. Just like with Emily, Michelle, or Jennifer. He agreed. I looked at the window 20 stories above the Chicago streets. No escape. Look on the bright side. You'll be helping build a better future. Humanity is too messy, too inefficient. We can do better. We are doing better, one person at a time, he said. My breaths grew shallow. Smoke filled the room, a gas of some kind. Don't worry. Your copy will live a wonderful life.
I'm Sean, 36, and I live alone in Texas. My wife and son left about a year ago. I haven't seen my little boy since then. He's 6 years old now. I work as a short-term security guard. Specifically, I'm hired to guard things like concerts, conferences, events, and exhibitions, which often need a lot of security guards to keep everything safe. Or when a company's regular security guard is on leave. When a company needs to quickly boost its workforce. They'll bring in temporary employees like me. This job is pretty good for me right now because of my health issues. A year ago, I had a car accident on my way home from work. After that awful accident, I'd get bad headaches whenever the weather changed. One day, the doorbell rang at 8 a.m. "Hello, I'm Brad." The man introduced himself in a cold tone and looked me up and down with a sharp gaze. "How can I help?" "I hear you work as a security guard. Can I come in and talk to you for a bit?" It turned out Brad was here for work, so I quickly invited him in. Brad sat across from me, still wearing the same expression and look in his eyes. "I need you to be a security guard at my house for one night only." "Are you organizing a party or something?" $500 in cash. I'll pay you right now." Brad didn't answer any of my questions about the security job. I could see his eyes slowly shifting from cold to red with anger. But I didn't want to agree without knowing all the details. I kept trying to ask Brad questions. $1,000. Brad slammed his hand on the table, leaned toward me, and shouted loudly. I was really worried and scared, but with the amount of money Brad was offering, I couldn't say no. I needed the money right at that time. Thinking the night would go by quickly and the job was something I was used to, I agreed with Brad. He immediately put $1,000 in cash on the table and then left. I had never taken a job with such a weird deal and attitude from the customer. That day, I couldn't shake this constant feeling of anxiety and insecurity. I wasn't exactly thrilled about making such a large sum of money. That night, right at 9 o'clock, I arrived at Brad's house. It was a decent house, but it felt a bit gloomy and cold to me. The lights in the house weren't all on. Only a dim light was visible through the window. I hesitated for a long time, but still didn't ring the doorbell. I had considered returning the money to Brad and turning down the job. "You're 20 minutes late, Sean." I was startled when Brad's cold voice cut through the silence. I'm sorry, but I don't think I can." "Come in. I don't have much time." Before I could finish, Brad interrupted me and went straight into the house. The atmosphere inside the house felt even colder than it was outside. Everything was pretty modern, but it looked like it hadn't been used in a long time. So there wasn't a party. I must have been wrong about that. There was no one else in the house except for Brad. I noticed that the wall was covered with pictures of a woman. So many. It was like an art exhibition dedicated to her. "This is my wife, Megan." I turned around, startled to see Brad standing right behind me, his eyes full of affection as he looked at pictures of his wife. His eyes were completely different from when he came to my house. Brad must really love Megan. Wait, Megan looked familiar to me. I wasn't sure, because the light was too dim to see everything clearly. I moved closer to get a better look at Megan's picture. "Here's what you need to do." Brad startled me again. I turned around and walked over to where Brad was standing. His eyes turned fierce and intimidating again. "Protect my wife's sleep." I froze, my emotions in turmoil when I heard Brad's strange request. He went upstairs and told me to follow him. The closer we got to the upper floor, the darker everything became, making it harder for me to see. I walked slowly, and the darkness was accompanied by a faint but strong enough stench that made my nerves react. I reflexively covered my nose, and Brad immediately turned to look at me. The darkness cast shadows over his scary eyes, making them stand out even more. The black shadow made the whites of his eyes stand out, highlighting the dark red veins. Without looking at me for long, Brad continued down the hallway to the room at the end. The creaking sound when Brad opened the door gave me chills. At that moment, I thought about running away, but my thoughts and actions didn't line up. Following Brad into the room, the stench was so strong it was hard to breathe. In the middle of the room was a bed with someone lying under the blanket. The room was filled with pictures of Megan, Brad's wife. This time, I was sure she looked very familiar and was trying to remember where I'd seen her before. Brad walked over to the bed, gently pulled back the covers, and revealed a badly decomposed body with bones and flesh mixed together. I couldn't say a word. I backed away and pressed myself against the wall, my heart racing. Megan, I found the person. You can rest easier now. Brad's words made me think he was definitely crazy. I rushed to the door, shaking the doorknob with one hand and dialing the police with the other. I shouted Brad's address to the police, telling them I was being held captive by a madman. A sharp pain shot through the top of my head. I felt warm streams running down my neck and face, and a salty, fishy taste filled my mouth. I passed out immediately and had no idea what happened next. When I woke up, I was tied up in a kneeling position on the floor. In front of me was the bed with the decomposing body that Brad had propped up. I was scared out of my mind, but couldn't move or scream. Next to the body was a photo of Megan and a bouquet of roses. At that close distance, I could see her face really clearly. This is... Brad gritted his teeth and his eyes widened. The one you caused the accident and then ran away from. You left her in agony and she passed away. That's right, this face, it was that woman. Do you have any idea how much pain I've been in for the past year? When I saw you, all I wanted to do was make you feel the pain my wife had to endure. I've lost everything. Brad screamed with hatred, pain, and helplessness. I was at a loss for words, with no way to explain that tough time. That night after the crash, I saw Megan, bleeding and quietly begging. But I was selfish. I decided to leave because I was thinking about the future and my family. In the end, my wife and son left me, and the loneliness and disease kept me stuck. Not a single day in the past year have I slept peacefully. I cried and begged Megan and Brad to forgive me. I deeply regretted what I had done. Brad couldn't calm down. He rushed at me and kept hitting my face and the wound on my head. The police broke down the door and rushed in. My vision was blurred with blood, and I saw Brad being restrained by 2 officers before I fainted again. When I woke up, I found myself in the hospital. I'd be treated for a while before facing the court. I'm Michael, a high school student living in Ohio, USA. I was not your A-grade student, and to be frank, I hated studying. Going to school every morning is quite tiring for me. As usual, I sat on the school bus to school. I sat in the last row, trying to relax by listening to music. I paid little attention to my classmates sitting in the vehicle. At a pickup stop, I suddenly had a strange feeling in my body. It was very difficult to describe. I paid attention to my surroundings, sat up straight, and looked out the window. I looked towards the small house where the bus was stopping. That was Mark's house. I knew that house. Mark and I studied together since elementary school. Mark is a quiet guy. He's shy, always sits in one place and doesn't have many friends. Everyone at school is impressed with Mark because of his excellent academic achievements. I used to act very mean to Mark just to satisfy my growing ego. One time, I poured so much glue into Mark's school bag that the whole lesson Mark sat with his head down, not knowing what to do. Or another time, I lured Mark to the women's restroom and poured paint all over the floor, causing him to slip and fall in front of the girls. But seeing Mark helpless and embarrassed made me laugh out loud. Thinking back, I feel so guilty. Back to that school morning. The bus stopped for a while, but Mark was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, a hand passed through the car window and waved for the driver to move without having to pick him up. It seems like it's Mark's dad. He's probably not feeling well today, I thought briefly. That day of studying was very long, a strange feeling of discomfort creeping up within me, and I didn't do well on the math test today. At the end of the day, I went home exhausted. The feeling of dread and nausea made me angry and grumpy, and I snapped with my parents' concerned questions. That night I watched the local news channel, and what I heard shocked my parents and me to the core. Mark's entire family was killed by an intruder early this morning. I was speechless when I heard the news. A cold feeling ran down through my body. I returned to my room, falling into an unknown void. The clock on the table ticked the time regularly, but I still couldn't sleep, constantly thinking about the strangeness of this morning's events. Darkness covered the surroundings. I saw Mark's house ahead. Standing at the door was Mark, his face covered in blood and his eyes gloomy, like an invisible soul trying to make contact from another world. Mark stared at me. My body couldn't move. I was extremely scared. Mark came very close, raised his bloody hand to touch my face, neck, and shoulders. Suddenly, he laughed loudly. His eyes and smile were wild. I woke up, startled, and found myself lying in bed, sweating profusely. I panicked and opened my eyes wide, looking at everything around me to make sure everything that had just happened was a dream. I was in my room. The window in the room was open, causing a cold wind to rush in, making me shiver. Suddenly, there was laughter. I was startled to see Mark in the corner of the room. I was scared, mumbling in my throat.
Surprised, right?
Mark looked at me with crazy eyes, completely different from him every day. I slapped my face hard to make sure this wasn't a dream. Mark is still alive. He is right in front of me. Mark went to lock the door and walked towards me with a creepy smile. He slowly pulled out a knife and held it close to my neck to control me. Let me tell you a secret. The murderer who killed the whole family is me. Mark laughed happily. He was crazy. I'm so disgusted and tired of being controlled by my parents. They don't let me do anything but do homework. Yesterday I had to study until 3 a.m. Seeing their faces drove me crazy. I want them to sleep forever, so no one can control me anymore. Using the great knowledge I have from physics and chemistry, it was easy to bypass the police. Every word Mark said made my body cold. I was extremely panicked in front of a crazy man willing to do anything. Y'all be next. Remember those pranks you did on me? Mark growled. The knife in Mark's hand moved closer to my neck. I could feel the sharp blade about to cut the skin of my neck. I trembled in fear. Mark laughed even more excitedly. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door and my mother's voice called out, "Michael, aren't you sleeping yet?" Me and my wife have a son, but he's been autistic since he was 4, which sucks. Even though we've tried all sorts of treatments, my son's condition hasn't gotten any better. When he turned 18, my wife said she wanted to put him in a treatment center to live. But I totally didn't agree. and we had a huge argument. My wife kept going on and on about how taking care of our son was super tough. If you think taking care of your own son is too much, then you don't have to do it anymore. I felt totally helpless, disappointed, and even desperate. After that, my wife left and never came back. Like she said, taking care of my son was really tough. He was an adult, but he couldn't do anything on his own. His mental and physical state changed too, but it was really unpredictable. But I was still gonna find a way to help my kid, no matter what. One weekend, my son woke up and gave me a piece of paper. I was pretty surprised when I saw what was on it. A list of ingredients to buy for a dish. My son can't write, so the words on the paper aren't pretty, but they're pretty clear. Especially these things can't go together. Potatoes, marshmallows, mustard, chicken, and a bunch of other stuff. I thought it was a waste of food, but to make my son a bit happier, I went along with it. After picking up the ingredients and getting home, my son was super excited and started cooking right away. He wouldn't let me do anything, so I just stood back and watched. When he finished, I had no idea what to even call the dish. It was this thick brown mess with a pretty bad smell. No way that could be called a dish. But seeing my son's happy face made me happy too. He was never this happy when his mom was still around. My son gently wrapped it in plastic wrap and put it in the fridge to keep it safe. I left it there for now and figured I'd toss it when he wasn't around. I totally forgot about that nasty dish in the fridge until the next morning. I rushed to the kitchen as soon as I remembered, but when I opened the fridge, the food was gone. The dish was washed and put under the sink. I called out to my son in a panic, like, how could he eat that? He's gonna be sick with diarrhea for days, maybe even weeks. My son came over, didn't say a word to my question, and just handed me another piece of paper. It was still a long list of stuff to buy: beef, gummy bears, celery, and so on. My son usually just writes his name with messy handwriting, so there's no way he wrote this piece of paper. I gave him a stern look and told him no. He started yelling and throwing stuff around. I felt totally helpless, trying to make my son happy again. That afternoon, another gross-looking and smelly dish appeared, all wrapped up and put in the fridge. I was set on finding a way to toss it once my son went to bed. That night, I checked the fridge and saw it was already eaten. I started to think my son wasn't the one who ate that gross food, because I'd been keeping an eye on him all evening. Going with my gut, I set up a camera in my son's room without telling him, and put 3 more around the house. In the middle of the night, my phone got an alert from the camera I had set up facing the backyard. At first, it looked like a dark shadow, but it was really weird. I zoomed in and saw it was a guy. His clothes were all ripped up, his beard was long and tangled, and his teeth were missing, filthy. He was holding a stick and pointing it at my son's window with a creepy smile. I quickly turned to the camera in my son's room. The kid stood at the window, grabbed the paper off the stick, and shoved it under the pillow fast. I jumped up and rushed out to the backyard with my gun. At that moment, I just acted on impulse. I didn't think about the gun laws and just kept firing into the dark around the yard. "Get out of here, bastard! What do you want with my son?" I yelled, and the thought of my son getting hurt made it impossible for me to calm down. About 15 minutes later, the cops showed up at my place, probably because the neighbors freaked out after hearing all those gunshots. I quickly explained everything and showed them the camera footage. Being aware of the situation, the cops said they'd look for that guy and asked me to hand over the gun right away. After talking to the cops, I dashed to my son's room, found the paper he had hidden under his pillow, and it was just a long list of stuff to buy. I tore up the paper, and my son saw it and started freaking out. It took him a long time to calm down and finally fall asleep. 2 days later, the cops said they'd found a guy's body in an old house at the end of the block, and his description matched what I'd reported. He was homeless and not all there mentally. They figured his cause of death was food poisoning that led to severe dehydration and sepsis. After hearing the news, I felt pretty mixed up. I went to my son's room, and he was sitting there drawing with total focus. I cried when I saw him. Maybe I had been too strict about his treatment. Even though the incident wasn't a big deal, it made me realize I wasn't taking care of him as well as I could. It was really tough, but I had to accept sending my son to the treatment center and visit him every afternoon after work. My son's doing better now. He can read and write pretty well.
I'm Alice, 26 years old, working as a switchboard operator for a hospital in Miami, Florida. My work is divided into 2 shifts, day shift and night shift. I often sign up to work the night shift because the night shift will have a higher pay. The work is not too difficult, but requires me to apply a lot of knowledge and skills at the same time. I will receive and handle calls to the hospital, provide information about services, support patients and customers, answer questions, and direct them to relevant departments. One evening, I was on duty. It was about 11 p.m. I received a call. Hello? How may I help you?
I called to ask for guidance on how to help a girl be happy again.
It was the voice of a man. I guess he was in his 40s. I was quite surprised by this case, but realized this was not an emergency. Maybe this man is quite meticulous in taking care of his loved ones. I asked him gently. I am very willing, sir. May I ask what your name is?
Logan.
Yes, Mr. Logan. I wonder if the person you are interested in is your wife or daughter?
She is not my wife or my daughter. We just met 2 hours ago. I already forgot her name.
His answer surprised me again, and I was silent for about 3 seconds. I asked him how she was doing. The man was silent for a moment, then spoke in a laughing voice.
She seemed very scared. She was crying. She seemed to be shaking.
Can I talk to her, sir? The man immediately refused when he heard my suggestion. He said he wanted to take care of the girl himself. I patiently continued the conversation with a bad feeling about this man. I hastily asked for the man's current address. He laughed.
Let me think for a moment. There are so many people here, so many. They are all lying quietly at my feet.
I remained silent at Logan's confusing answer. He suddenly laughed, said he was just joking, and read the address to me. Working very quickly on the computer, I realized it was an area near the cemetery, about 20 kilometers from the hospital. Suddenly, a girl's moans rang out from the other end of the line. I listened attentively. The moans seemed to come out while being gagged. Is something wrong, sir?
Oh, no. My girl is a bit resistant. I don't like this at all.
I heard a punch or something. I'm sure it was the sound of force being applied to the human body. I was very confused with all the inferences. That man spoke up.
She's better now, but she's looking at me with angry eyes.
I try to reassure myself and do my job properly. Mr. Logan, please let me speak to... Before I could finish my sentence, a painful sound rang out very clearly. Next was some sticky sound. My heart beat fast. I felt scared and creepy with my own speculations. On the other end of the line, a creepy laugh rang out.
She didn't look at me anymore, nor did she protest. She was sleeping on the floor.
I didn't answer anymore. My hands worked quickly on the computer. I quickly dispatched the ambulance and police car to the location the man named Logan had provided. After nearly 20 minutes, police cars and ambulances arrived at the location I identified. It is the guard building of a local cemetery. After calling loudly and no one responded, the police immediately rushed in. The scene inside the room made all the police and medical staff present there freeze. On the floor is the intact body of the female guard. All of her toes and fingers were severed. Blood splattered all over the walls, floors, tables, and chairs. She lost both eyes. The mouth was sewn tightly shut. The clothes have many rough cuts. All cameras in the cemetery were stolen. 2 surveillance computer screens were also smashed. The police also could not collect any further evidence to investigate the man named Logan. The following days I was filled with regret. I should have called the police sooner when I noticed something unusual. I heard the entire process of that pervert murdering the female security guard without being able to save her. Police are still actively looking for information about Logan. I'm also not sure if the name he called himself is accurate or not. About a week later, I'm also on the night shift. On duty that day, there were many accidents and emergencies. My mind was extremely stressed. I had just rested a bit. At around 12 o'clock, the phone rang again. I regained my composure and answered the phone with a professional attitude. The other end of the line was silent for a moment, then spoke.
Do you remember me?
I immediately fell into panic, because I immediately recognized that voice as Logan's. Before I could react, he continued to haunt me. He accurately described my physical characteristics and the clothes I was wearing. Even scarier was the mole on the back of my neck, which he could also see. I stood up in fear and looked around the office. Logan's loud laughter rang out from the phone. The perverted and disgusting voice made my limbs weak.
Do you want to spend a memorable night with me?
My name is Taylor. 12 years ago, when I was still a naive 9-year-old girl, I had a close friendship with Maddie. We were in the same class and lived in the same neighborhood, so we were always inseparable, like a pair of twin sisters. Both of our parents loved each other's friends, so I often stayed over at Maddie's house, and he did the same. My house was at the end of the neighborhood, while Maddie's house was in the middle. Everything here was very peaceful and gentle, from the neighbors to the animals they kept. Dogs were the most common pets in my neighborhood. The lovely and friendly 4-legged friends with all sorts of sizes and colors. I really, really loved dogs, and many times I asked my parents for permission to have a small dog. But my parents didn't agree, because I was still too young to take responsibility for an animal's life. That made me long even more to have a loyal companion by my side. One afternoon, when Maddie and I were playing in front of her house, there were no adults at home. A man whom neither Maddie nor I had ever seen in the neighborhood before appeared. He was walking a large, light yellow dog, which I later learned was a Labrador. The man called out to Maddie and me, saying that we could pet his dog if we wanted to. We often did the same with other dogs in the neighborhood, so we were excited and ran over. But the man's dog smelled very bad, as if it hadn't been bathed in months. I noticed that the dog seemed quite lethargic and tired, constantly scratching, causing fur and dirt to fly everywhere. The owner of the dog was a tall man with a thick beard that covered most of his mouth, but his head was shaved and shiny. He stared at us intently, and the constant smile hidden beneath his beard trembled ever so slightly. With my hands were covered in dirt and dog hair, that made a picky girl like me feel uncomfortable. Maddie was still happily petting the dog, while I just stood there watching. The man took out a camera and offered to take a picture of us playing with his dog. I didn't answer, while Maddie happily agreed. I noticed the smile on the man's face become increasingly frightening. The clicking sounds and the constant flash of the camera made me feel very uncomfortable. His posture while taking the pictures became more hunched, and the camera moved closer and closer toward Maddie. I pulled Maddie's hand to stand her up straight and told her I wanted to go inside to wash my hands. The man seemed displeased with me, but quickly regained his smile and made a new suggestion. He said we could come to his house on the next street, where there were lots of candy and 2 adorable cats. Maddie clapped her hands in excitement and immediately agreed, while I just wanted to go wash my hands right then. I didn't feel comfortable at all with the man in front of me, especially his gaze and smile. Seeing that I seemed hesitant, he added more words to stimulate Maddie's excitement. He told me to go inside and wash my hands. He would wait to go with me. I was hesitated for a moment, then quickly ran into the house, quickly washed my hands with water, and ran back out. But Maddie and the other man were gone. I ran out of the house in a panic, shouting Maddie's name as I ran. The thought of losing her made me extremely panicked. I ran home, crying and telling my parents to quickly find Maddie. After hearing me recount everything, my parents immediately called Maddie's parents and the police. I observed everyone's reactions and sensed that the situation was very serious, which made me even more panicked, and I couldn't stop crying. By that evening, I heard the police announce that they had found the man's house, and Maddie was also found inside. In his house, the police found many photographs of young girls taken from various angles and distances. After being examined, the doctor concluded that Maddie showed signs of abuse, but fortunately, it was at a mild level. The perverted man's name is Dominic, 56 years old, and he had to stand trial for 2 consecutive charges. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison and will continue to be monitored after serving his sentence. My mom took me to visit Maddie at the hospital, and fortunately, she was doing very well. I promised that I would never leave Maddie alone again, and she promised to always be careful with everything.